Cool. Hi everyone, I can see we've already got a number of people. We won't get started for another minute or so, but if you have used the webinar system before and you know how to raise your hand to let us know that the cameras and the audio are working for you, that'd be great. Cheers, Peter, appreciated. Thank you, great. So just a couple more minutes before we get started. At 7 o'clock, just a few more people to join us. So 7 o'clock, should we get started? Yeah, so good evening everyone and welcome to tonight's webinar, which is on delivering participant-focused events. I'm Rayanne and I'm the Events Development Officer at British Orienteering, and today I'm joined by co-author of Getting Active Outdoors, Martin Chester, and tonight's presenter. So this webinar is part of a programme of webinars that we're running in 2019. There's approximately one a month, and it's designed to provide sort of interactive and accessible training opportunities for the clubs, for our volunteers. So we've been running them for a few months now, and the webinars are all recorded. So if you've missed any of them, you can go back and have a look at them. You can get to them through our website. But the advantage for all of you joining us live is that you get to interact, share your ideas, ask any questions, give us any comments live, and we'll build those into tonight's session. So the first way that you can get involved using sort of the side panel on your right. Oh, I seem to have lost connection. So the side panels on your right should provide you with a can you still hear me? Oh no. We lost you. Oh no.
You need to rejoin, Rayanne. Would you like me to carry on there? Or do you want to take over on this?
Yeah. Yeah, I can. If I just speak over where we are here. So on your right hand side, there's a little icon with a hand which you can use. Some of you already have to raise your hand and answer. We might ask you a couple of questions. Just let us know if it applies to you. The next way of you getting involved is asking questions or leaving us some comments. So if you want to use the comments box throughout the session, as and when thoughts, ideas, comments or questions pop into your mind, we will try and build them in as we go. So don't worry about saving them up all for the end. And the third way is we have got a couple of polls for you to get involved in, and that's should be easy. It'll pop up on your screen and just click as and which applies to you. So shall we get started?
Great. Thank you very much. You've got lovely technology. In this session tonight, we'll be looking at ways to make our events more participant focused. And obviously, if we're going to discuss that, we need to really think about our understanding of that and what that means, you know, and more importantly, we're really interested to think about why you might want to do that. We're going to ask you a little poll about that in a second. And we need to then explore what motivates people to take part in sporting and orienteering events in particular. And we then want to explore what those different variables are. So what are the things that we can change about our events, and how can we actually practically make adjustments and apply the knowledge from tonight's session to come up with different events that might appeal to different people in different ways. What we then like to do is wrap all of that up at the end by considering the whole experience of attending an event. And by that, I mean the whole sort of chain of events, from first thinking about it to first finding out about it, to getting the information, and then to turning up, taking part, enjoying the event, and then reviewing it afterwards. So, as with all good things, we're going to start with why. The why is at the heart of our plan for tonight. Why be participant focused? Before we go any further, what we want to think about is what we're trying to fundamentally achieve. It's really important to understand that we already do a good job of attracting the people that come to our events already. So what we're really particularly interested in is whether we can understand what it is we're trying to get out of this, this seminar or this webinar tonight. And Rayanne will see if she can put those up for you now. The big question for us is, we would like you to answer, is whether you would like to improve satisfaction and retention. So whether you would simply like to kind of keep people, or maybe get people coming back more often. Whether you would like to grow participation. So whether your aims for this are to get more people involved and to grow the numbers of events. We would also then like to know whether you're interested in attracting a variety of participants. So do you want to diversify? Do you want to bring people that you haven't already got to take part in your events? And of course, we've got the universal catch-all at the end, which is the other button. And you can always sort of add to details to that by putting a comment in the comments box.
Well, we're almost there.
Rayanne's just getting the Wi-Fi back up and running at Orienteering.
Just bear with us a second.
These things always seem to happen in slow motion when you're doing something like this.
I think we might maybe take the responses by in the comments section.
Great.
So just to remind you there, the interesting thing for me is whether we're looking at improving satisfaction and retention, keeping people, growing participation, more people, attracting a variety of participants, so diversification or other. And please feel free to comment, Rayanne, and get back online any second, and then we'll pick up the comments as we go. Once we understand what it is that we're trying to achieve, then that will give us a much better idea how to tweak our events and how to do things differently, as well as then moving on to what we might want to do differently in order to achieve those aims. So moving on, let's get stuck in. What do we mean by participant focus? It's very much a phrase of the moment. And really what we're interested in tonight is understanding what motivates people to take part. Think about how people interact with an event or how they interact with a club. Think about the feelings and actions that drives in them, the desire to do more, the desire to come back more often, the satisfaction and pleasure that they get out from an event that makes them want to come back and do more. And if we can understand that motivation, that's really key to getting people to turn up on the day. Now, the really important first step is have a look at orienteering through the eyes of others. So we need to turn that telescope around. We are all very, very familiar with our own sport, and that often makes us blind to the things that other people from the outside would see. The other thing that's really key, we've been doing this kind of delivery with all sorts of different sports. One thing that's really important to understand is that we as individuals are all different. Of course, but it's really easy to assume, that's a real dangerous trap to fall into, that others are motivated by the same things as we are. And often they simply aren't. So what we want to think about is why people take part in our events, what's particularly special about our events, given that they're successful already, and then what can we do to meet the needs of more other people, depending on those outcomes that we talked about just a moment ago. Now, The
first thing we need to establish is that people have really busy lives at the moment. And this is a very important starting point. People have lots of things competing for their time, and people are getting more sophisticated than ever at marketing their product, at marketing the opportunities. And so for us as a sort of humble club, it's quite hard for us to compete with some of the big players sometimes. You know, people in their families are living sort of busier lives than ever, and people are working from home, they're working more flexibly, they're working in different ways. But that means the work time takes demand at all sorts of different times through the week. We've seen a real growth in people taking part in the Tough Mudder Type Challenge events. We've seen young people spend more time than ever in front of screens. As our society gets older, more and more people are involved in caring for somebody, and that eats into their leisure time and their social time. And we've seen really sophisticated developments where cinemas or pay-as-you-go gyms are really being creative, and they've got an awful lot more resources and knowledge and clout behind the scenes than we could ever have. But they're getting very good at marketing their products to people and using up that leisure time on a variety of different ways. So it's a very important question for us to answer in the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Why do people come orienteering? That's what we really want to understand. Now, it's because they're motivated to do it. So what we're going to try and do this evening is we're going to start off by talking about motivation. We're going to think about what drives and motivates people. We're going to consider this as a sort of a focusing funnel, if you like. We're going to start talking quite generally to begin with of the kind of macro trends, and this is stuff that motivates people in their daily lives. Then I'm going to give you some research that we've pulled together from sport in terms of why people are motivated to take part in sport. But we really want to focus on why people get active outdoors, because that's the competition really. And when we look at orienteers, they will often take part in a number of different outdoor activities. That's the thing that we've really got to understand and compete with. So we're going to finish off by focusing quite specifically on orienteering, and we're going to try and talk as much as we possibly can about making everything as orienteering specific as possible. Now, we can do that straight away right at the top when we talk about general motivation. There's a lovely model. It's a bit of a holy church. Some people are really into it, and others can't believe it's that simple. But essentially, most of us have three basic needs in order to be motivated. You can see them on the right-hand side in the Venn diagram. You can now think about meaningful relationships or your career, if you like. Of course, we're going to talk about orienteering. And this model will really explain why orienteering is so good at motivating the people that it attracts. The first fundamental is that we like to have a sense of autonomy. Most of us like to feel in control of the course of our lives. We like to be able to make choices, we like to be able to make decisions, and we like to feel in charge of our own destiny. If we think about orienteering, of course, the great thing about it is people can turn up to an orienteering event. They can choose what colour or what length of a course they want to take part in, and they can then make all of their own decisions about route choices and how they satisfy and complete the course. And we give people loads of autonomy. Relatedness is super important. People really need a sense of belonging. Young people, when they take part in sport, they'll walk into a room and they'll either see a bunch of people in sort of ballet kit or a bunch of people in martial art kit and decide whether this is a group of people they want to belong to or not. And we all have an inherent drive to interact and connect with others. And if we can recognise that, we realise that actually orienteering really satisfies that for a lot of people. And a lot of us that have been involved for a long time will think of our club, and it's really a part of who we are, and sharing our leisure time with those people really matters to us. Now, competence is an interesting one. Most people aren't motivated if they simply feel competent. They like to be stretched, but they like to be stretched just enough. People like to seek control and they like to experience mastery. And that's where orienteering is so good, because people can challenge themselves at their own levels. They can constantly improve and they can constantly achieve and develop through time. Now, having said how great that is, if we then think about an event rather than orienteering as a sport, that means that there are some real traps that we can fall into. If people turn up for an event and they don't have the autonomy, they don't feel in control, they don't have the choices that they would like in terms of different courses, and the event is not how they expected, that can really disappoint them and demotivate them. If they can't choose the level of course that they like, or they find that actually it was harder or more technically difficult or longer than they expected, they can feel incompetent, and that can lead to a crash in motivation.
Likewise, if we don't do anything to cash in and capitalise on that relatedness, that social aspect of the event, then people can go away feeling disappointed, like they would have liked to have shared in the results with people. They would have liked to have had a sort of debrief and a social sort of feedback session with people. And that can lead to a downturn in motivation. So for every positive, there's a flip side if we don't get it right. Now, in terms of sport, there is a lot more research that you can have a look at. And this comes from Sport England, particularly from Youth Insight. But we've kind of stolen this bit because there are 6 key headings here that are the things that most commonly appeal to people and motivate people to take part in sport. Now, some of them are really obvious and it won't surprise you what they are, like having fun or time with friends and family or developing themselves. Others might be a bit more of a surprise, particularly for young people. I was always shocked when I saw how much people valued improving their appearance, for example, as a motivating factor for taking part in sport. As we go around this, we'll revisit this later on. You'll notice that some of these will be things that you resonate with, but for some of you, this is why it's important to remember that we're not all the same. Your view of feeling good might be very different to somebody else's view. For some people, it might be about relaxing. For some people, it's about staying healthy. What do we mean by having fun? What is it that would make an event fun for you? And when people talk about developing themselves, it's important that we get under their skin and find out what they mean by that, whether they want to try new stuff or develop the skills that they've already got, whether it's about being independent or developing themselves as a person. For some people, they want to spend time with their friends and family, and that's really important for them. For other people, orienteering is very much me time. They want to spend time without their friends and family, and they want to just get out into the forest and spend time focusing on a challenge on their own. Likewise, success and goals. I mean, what makes an event successful? What goals would you like to set? That will vary from person to person. So it's important we revisit this later on in the session and think about that very clearly. Now, we've got another question for you. I'm very interested in whether Rayanne's managed to get back online and can put this up. Yeah. Excellent. There's a very good little summary sheet of this and some very good insight on the web. If you want to attract young people, it would take us far more time than we've got this evening to go into this. But the research that Sport England have done has identified 6 different youth personalities, and they all have different types. They all have a different type of engagement or relationship with sport, and they all have different sort of attitudes. If you would like to find out more about that, you can find the information on the Sport England website, and we've produced a little handout for you that's got all of the links to the insight that we're going to mention tonight, so you can follow up this webinar by doing your own research and reading.
So I suppose the question for everybody is how many of you put your hand up if you've seen this research before, and let us know if you've done anything with it. And give people a moment for that.
No, that's good, because that's a real take home for you. We'll give you the sources of information, and you can follow this up by doing some reading if it interests you, and if looking out for more young people is what you're interested in, then this is a really good place to focus your effort. Now, it's not all about young people, of course. There are loads of really good bits of research and information on different topics. Top right of the pictures, for example, that's the Getting Active Outdoors report that I authored with Kelly Gordon in 2015. That's a really good study on why people take part in all sorts of outdoor activities. But there's loads of really good stuff on women in sport and how to go to where the women are, how to market sport in a way that women will find more appealing and less intimidating. There's loads of stuff on Youth Insight, and some really brilliant stuff on disability sport. You can find all of that on sportengland.org/research, and the links are in your handout. Great. So let's now start thinking about getting active outdoors and really focusing in on the people that go orienteering. The Getting Active Outdoors product had a massive nationwide survey. We had thousands of responses across all sorts of different types of activity, and it gave us some really, really robust data. The take-home messages, we've distilled that whopping great report down to the bits that matter for you and matter for orienteering. The take-home message for me is that family was like, to spend time with family, that's the key driver. That was the #1 macro motivation for people getting active outdoors, regardless of what sport it was. What's
Interesting is that 70% of all children who participate outdoors do so with
their household.
Yeah, just to add to the family aspect of this, in an orienteering context, from an events point of view, there are two, maybe more, but if you look at the family that wants to go and do the run together and engage as a group, or the family where the parents want to do their own runs and the kids are a little bit more autonomous and want to go and do their own thing. So then you need to think about start times which maybe allow one parent to get a run in before the second parent goes on their run. So there's always one of the parents around for the kids to come back to, and so on. So just looking at that family driver might still have several different implications at event level.
And it was very interesting that we discovered that active people's children are twice as likely to take part in activity, but the opposite is true as well. If the kids get into an activity, then the parents are more likely to take it up. Don't forget that the kids can't attend unless the parents bring them in a lot of cases. So if you can find things for the parents to do, find ways to motivate them and keep them active or get them involved, and then they're far more likely to bring the youngsters back in greater numbers. Now, in terms of those young people, their motivations were different. Under 18, and the thing that was really important for them was that sport was a vehicle by which they had fun with their friends. Now, a lot of young people, as you'll find out from that youth insight, have a very tricky relationship with sport with a capital S. And you know, a lot of them weren't picked for the first 15 when they were at school, for example. And these are people, it's a hefty percentage right across the sector, but particularly when you look at that percentage for young people, it's massive, and who find that outdoor sports and outdoor activities are a really refreshing, appealing alternative to traditional team games and traditional sport. So there's a real opportunity for us to give them something different that satisfies them. Now, I'm not going to go into the report, it's a whopper, you can read it if you like, but what we're actually going to do is focus on the bits that matter. We discovered that there were 8 main motivation types, and this was all down to how people answered the questions. Now, these are motivations, they're not personality types. We're not pigeonholing people or putting people into a box. It's all down to how they answered specific questions about what motivates them to get active. We discovered that there were 8 different types, but the ones that are most relevant to us in orienteering are these. The challenger is very interesting and predominantly male. These are people that will typically take part in Tough Mudder events, for example. They'll control the battle against nature. They don't like to be out of control. They're probably control freaks. They really like to push themselves. They're really focused on personal achievement. They're focused on reaching goals. They will train for these goals and events over the years. They might not even enjoy the majority of the experience at the time, and you probably heard the phrase type 2 fun, but the enjoyment comes from gaining a sense of control of the challenge and the difficulty of the environment, and learnings for these people are applied to their everyday life. Now, this is a very hefty proportion of the market. It's 21%, and this is one of the biggest segments across the outdoor sector. We found twice as many challenges as average when we looked at orienteer responses, and that might not surprise you. When we looked at the latest satisfaction surveys, people would say things like, I love the mixture of the mental and physical challenge. It was a total reset after a busy week at work. In terms of appealing to and satisfying that challenge and motivation, there are some things that we can do to appeal to them straight away. We can design events that tap into that technical difficulty. We can provide the chance to test, to stretch, and if what they want to do is develop, then they've got to be able to measure their personal ability. We can also come up with a seasonal series of challenge type events. Now that means you might like to think about setting challenging goals over a period that people can train for, and it might be that you want to think about incentive type challenges. Did you want to mention something about that?
I did, yes. So I'm going to jump in on your screen here because I've been booted up again. But in one of the things that British Orienteering has set up are, and some of you will know these, the challenger and racing incentive schemes, where your participants, based on their results from the events, will get different certificates that they will get back. So if you're organising events where you're thinking you might get your challenger type participants, or participants who are motivated by those challenges, then you might want to think about making sure those results are uploaded onto the British Orienteering website results section, so that facility is then available for them to use. So again, it's those incentives that these particular participants are after.
Excellent, thank you very much. Coping very well with the lack of technology there. wasn't as rehearsed. Another segment that's really important, or motivation that's really important, is that of fitness and nature. And you know, by all means, show a hand if this resonates with you, if you recognise this one. But an increasing number of people will see the outdoors as a great big green gym. They would far rather be outside exercising rather than going into a gym. These people tend to be 35 years plus. An awful lot of them would like to do this with their family. If they're family members, they'll go out together and exercise. A sense of physical and mental well-being is important. A sense of challenging themselves is important, but competing is probably not so important. They're more likely to see this as training. Again, it's a significant proportion of people who get active outdoors. It won't surprise you at all that we found more than average amongst the orienteering members of that data set. From the satisfaction survey, what really struck me was the number of people that commented on the opportunity to exercise in a beautiful place. So, you know, I thought the course planning was excellent. It took some lovely sections of bluebells, which made for enjoyable running. So yes, they're getting their exercise, but it really matters to them where they're doing this. We can hold on to that as an opportunity. So when we want to appeal to these people and satisfy that motivation, remember, it's about personal development. It's not so much about competition. People would like to think about the health benefits of orienteering. So in that case, we can actually promote events in terms of the distance covered or the vertical meters climbed, and those are the kind of things that they'll look for to decide whether this is going to satisfy their training for the week. We can also think about orienteering as a very sociable way to increase their weekly exercise. So rather than just going out and running more junk miles, it might be something that they feel stimulated by and mix in with their their bigger training plan. Now, this is a very interesting group of people, the tribe member, and I'm sure this will resonate with some of you. These are people that are committed to their sport or activity, and they take it very seriously. Their sport is very much a part of who they are. So if you've ever wondered why somebody would sign up for a committee and get involved with helping others on the weekend rather than just sort of doing their own thing, this is the tribe member motivation. Training and skill improvement is very important to them, but competing and winning really matters as well. These people like a sense of status and rank, and they're very likely to be part of a specific club. It's not a massive segment of the overall active outdoors market, but it won't surprise you at all that we found twice as many tribe members as average when we looked at the responses from orienteers in the data set. Now, again, there's a flip side with this. The more tribal your club, and the more people cash in on this, the more of a sense of belonging is felt by those people who are in. But there's a real danger to that those on the outside, or those wanting to join for the first time or come along and get involved for the first time, those on the outside might feel more out than you would imagine, and might feel like it's more of a clique if we're not careful. So we just need to be aware of that.
I think it's just
One of those things that we can actively make the effort to be conscious of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, we saw some really sort of telltale comments in the satisfaction survey. The first half of the course I enjoyed running on my own. Then I found a group of confused beginners and was pleased to be able to help them with the second half. This is somebody who clearly enjoys helping others and is clearly motivated by that. So we can learn from that, as Rayanne says, and capitalise on that. Now, in terms of appealing to these people and satisfying that motivation, these folks really think of orienteering as being, you know, our thing. So let's really value being a part of that and make a big deal of it. It matters to them, it gels us together, and it's a really important sort of motivating factor. Belonging is key, and we can also realise that these people are very likely to volunteer for roles and responsibilities within the club. That motivates them, so let's cash in on that. Now, we've got a question for you about club outfits and merchandise and how you use that.
Yeah, so here comes our poll. It should be showing up on your screens. There we go. Yes, back online. So yeah, so how does your club distribute merchandise and kits? If you just tick which ones apply to you. So if you do a number of those, go ahead and get involved. You can tick multiple, is what I'm saying. Great, so we've got about 60% of the people voted, so give everybody a couple more minutes to have a think.
Thanks so much for bearing with us with the technology. That was it ran smoothly earlier. Guaranteed to go wrong.
Okay, just another 30 seconds, folks, if you want to get your responses in. Super. Right, so we can close that now, and I will share the results with you. So we've got quite a lot of people who are saying that it's the merchandise and kit is only for club members, and then on top of that, you've got a small proportion where the kit is earned by role or achievement. Interesting if people want to comment on whether it is role or achievement, elaborate on that, and then kit that can be purchased by anyone.
It's good that everybody's got some, and we've seen some real success in other arenas. So Parkrun, for example, have had really good sort of coveted incentives. Their milestone T-shirts have been a great example, whereby if people do more events or sort of make more progress or hold a status within your orienteering club, you might like to think about merchandise that then becomes accessible to them, and really capitalising on that sort of driving motivation. Now, the final one that we're going to go through is the Explorer. It's very interesting. These are folks who really love getting out and exploring and discovering the natural environment. And to be honest, the physical activity is normally secondary, and it's the vehicle by which they get out and do the thing they're interested in, whether that's bird watching or photography or simply just sort of getting out and enjoying the scenery and the outdoor environment for them. And it's the biggest segment by far across the Getting Active Outdoors data set. So more people are motivated by this in general. Because the activity is secondary, it won't surprise you if we found slightly less explorers than average. But just because there's less than average, don't forget it is the biggest segment. So there's still quite a lot of people that are motivated by this. And again, that was reinforced by the comments in the satisfaction survey, where people would really make a point about where the orienteering events took them. And the sort of environment that they enjoyed whilst taking part. Now, if we want to appeal to these sort of people, there are some very simple top tips. It's all about discovery, it's all around exploration, it's all about sort of getting out into beautiful places. So discover events really appeal. The other thing about the Explorers was this has the biggest family subsegment. So an awful lot of explorers will see their outdoor activity as a vehicle by which they can spend time outdoors with their family. Think about setting courses that might tell a story, that might bring a heritage trail to life or bring some sort of local interest. Think about putting controls in places that aren't just difficult to find, but maybe deliver a view when they get there or are in a beautiful location. Or there's something interesting or cunning about the environment. You might like to think about the natural events along the way, the bird life, the wildlife, the flora, anything that you can kind of put a secondary layer onto setting that course. So there's something for the explorer to discover will really increase their motivation. You can be as creative as you like. Don't stop with just where they're going to go. You might want to think about when, for example. So for these folks, maybe going out and orienteering at sunset or full moon, it might sound kind of crazy and romantic, but it's these things that will appeal to their sense of discovery of the natural environment. So I promised you we were going to focus in on orienteering. So let's look at some of the data that came back from the orienteers in the Getting Active Outdoors survey. In terms of when they started, people get into orienteering pretty young. 44% started during their school years. So that's the gateway, that's the entry, the sort of the biggest entry. 25% started between 24 and 44. So it's worth thinking about where they came from. If we can understand that, we can think about where to go looking for these people. Where are we going to find people of that age group that might want to take part in orienteering? And then in terms of where they started, there were four top groups. I mean, don't forget, those figures mean that 3/4 of people started orienteering before their mid-40s. So the top 4 locations for that were uniform groups, family, friends, and school. So if we're looking for sort of, new members for the picking, those will be the logical places to go finding people where, particularly uniformed groups, youth groups, and school, for example, might complement that family driver that we've already talked about. Now, in terms of their ability, what was interesting is that when we asked them how good they were at this, their perception was that their ability was quite high. 35% advanced, 35 intermediate, so 70% intermediate and above. Only 16% beginner. So folks tend to get into orienteering, they tend to improve quite quickly, and then they tend to stick with it and develop throughout their lives. That's a really key thing. So development and skill development is very important. In terms of frequency, 65% of people nearly participate throughout the year. That's high compared to other sports. 27% participate once every few months. And we've got a really good active hardcore of 15% who take part monthly, 16% weekly. So there's a really good population out there that are very keen and active, and they'd like to do more. When we asked them what the most important factors were, it keeps coming back to some of these key headings and these key words that we've used. They answered the questions. Challenge was important, health or exercise was important, and particularly for this group, health or exercise on their own. That's interesting, as you might imagine. Fresh air, of course, adventure, and competing and winning. These were the most important factors. The least important factors were entertaining the children. That's not why they do it. They might need to do it to take part, but that's not why they do it. The interesting thing here is that they weren't inspired by the media. So perhaps, we're not going to go looking for new members or new orienteers through those channels. It wasn't part of another hobby. They weren't inspired by icons. So using ambassadors for the sport might not be as effective as it perhaps might be in other sports. And they really weren't bothered about whether it was cool or not. And I'm sure that will make most of you sort of raise a smile. But it's very much a part of doing our own thing in that wonderful environment. There's some great research out there that's sport specific now. So focusing in, the Women in Orienteering report from 2017, authored by Rachel Atherton, is a really brilliant document. But there's some lovely standouts in there that really reinforce the kind of comments that we've made already. Now, 100% of the participants interviewed stated that receiving a positive first experience of orienteering was a key driving factor. So no pressure, people, but you've really got to get people's first event or their first experience top notch if we want people to take part and stick with it. 67% of respondents to the questionnaire state that having fun and enjoying themselves was most important. And just look at that, having fun, enjoying themselves, quality experience, health, fitness, they just keep coming up time and time again. So it's very important for us those are the general things, very important for us to actually understand our people. What we don't want to do is we don't want to demotivate the folks that we've got already. So let's think about understanding the folks that come now and find out what we do well. Because hopefully that will give us an idea how we can just simply do more of that. So have a think about who your participants are. And I would always want to ask you, do you really know what they want, or are you simply making educated guesses? Are you falling into that classic trap of assuming that everybody's motivated in the same way that you are, when actually they simply might not be? You might like to consider the following, of course. Yes, you can do some complicated market research. There's all sorts of tools out there to do that. You might want to do some surveys, and you can make those as simple as you like. It doesn't need to be complicated, this. Or you might have a club forum by which you can gather the views of club members. One way or another, it's really important to get some feedback on your events and find out what works for them and what we could be doing better. So just ask them. It's not rocket science at all, but do make the effort. Don't make assumptions. Get out there and ask them. Now, that's all been going on a sort of national level. So the participation satisfaction survey ran last year in 2018. There's a really brilliant infographic here, and there are some links to this in the handouts. But Rayanne might like to talk to us a little bit about that work that's ongoing at the moment.
I'm going to jump in here again. So this satisfaction survey has been running since last year. We've got probably 10 or so, we've worked with 10 or so clubs to get this data together, and what we're trying to do is really understand the participant experience as a whole, looking at sort of the pre-event stuff, the logistics, the course, the volunteers, the facilities, and generally how they're perceiving that. So we're using this tool to help clubs then focus on the areas of their events that they really want to develop, and based on the feedback and not just the stats but the comments that are coming through from this. So it's a free tool that is available for all clubs to use. So if you are interested, I've stuck another handout in that you'll get at the end of the session, and you'll be able to then you'll have a little bit more information about what is offered through this tool and how we can help you maybe better understand your participants and what their needs are. So
excellent. Thank you, Ren. It's a really good bit of work, and I've been lucky enough to have a sneak preview of some of the results, and I breathed a huge sigh of relief after putting these slides together that actually reinforces everything that we're talking about. The comments are absolutely fantastic. So we really need to think about the detail now of what people are after. Remember these are the same headings we talked about before. These are the things, the most common things that people want from sport. And we've got another handout for you that puts this on a little profiling tool. So you can actually map out on this in an interactive way what people actually want from the events, and find out whether they're getting it, and then think about what the event delivers afterwards. I'm going to very quickly just talk you through this, and I hope it'll make sense. But by all means, just fire in your comments, or you know, if any of the examples resonate with you or don't resonate with you, then we'd love to hear from you as we go. Okay. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that we've simply spread out those headings into kind of key areas, and there's a blank set of lines next to each one where people can fill in the ingredients that matter to them. So what does a particular participant think about improving appearance that matters? Is it the fact that, you know, nobody has to wear a leotard to go orienteering, and they can just go out running into the forest with baggy clothes on, feeling confident about their body image? That might be a really big sell for some people. What is it about feeling good that matters to them? You know, what makes them feel good? So we need to ask those questions and get them to fill in those blanks and tell us what ingredients matter to them. You'll see some examples that we've put in there, and you might find, for example, that people in feeling good think about de-stressing. Some people think about health benefits. For some people it's me time, for some people it's keeping active. As we said before, one person's idea of fun is very different to somebody else's, so you have to ask them, you have to get them to write that down. For some it will be travelling to a brilliant place that they've never been before, or doing an event somewhere they've never been. For others it's all about the social aspects, so ask them what that is, and you know, what the important key factors are. Again, developing themselves. Do they want to develop skills? Do they want to develop qualifications? Do they simply want to learn something and improve? The time with friends and family is very interesting, as we said before. For some, that will be a really massive driver, and they'll really want to spend time with their family. For young people, it will be a social connection. They're really going to want to spend time with their orienteering friends. For other people, it might be the me time thing again, and it might be that actually they want to get away from their friends and their family and just do something for themselves for once. So ask them, find out what matters to them. Just as developing myself was diverse, success and goals, people will set all sorts of criteria for success and all sorts of different goals. So ask them what matters, and that's the only way you're going to find out. Now, once you've got somebody to fill in all those different boxes, we've got some nice comments coming in there. See if those resonate with anyone.
No, not yet. Let us know what you think.
I hope that makes sense to you. Anyway, you can always give us a thumbs up if it does. What's important is you've absolutely got to ask people what the ingredients sort of matter to them, what details matter to them. Now, the next thing you'll notice is we put this little kind of axis on here, and that means that we can actually ask people how important these factors are, because people might come up with a big list of things about improving appearance, but you'll see here that they've only scored it as being moderately important. Whereas success and goals, for example, this is a profile of a 15-year-old female orienteer, and she suggested that success and goals really are not very important to her, whereas having fun is massively important to her. And her definition of having fun is spending time with the girls, and it can be a real laugh, you know. So the social aspect of the sport and the events is really what she's after. It's a very simple exercise. We don't need to make it any more complicated than that. I've even known some clubs in sports who've put this on the back of their membership forms and just got people to think about it and fill it in, and gathered all sorts of amazing information from folks. Because once you've done this, you can actually then look at the events and go, well, you know, actually, yes, our events are fun, but everybody talks about the social side, and maybe we don't prioritise that as much as we could. And we thought that everybody was going to be motivated by success and goals and results, but actually they're more interested in spending time with their friends and their family, or developing skills. So you can get an awful lot of very important insight from the people that you've got.
I think the challenge as well that you guys face in this respect is that you're going to have people who are on lots of different or levels of each motor area that's important to them. And so for some, it will be the improving appearance that is really important. For some, it's the success. For others, it's the social side. So, you know, I think people are quite varied, so trying to understand the profile of people who are coming and offering something a little bit for each one, or making sure you are addressing each of those aspects to provide a bit of a holistic experience for participants is really quite key.
Yeah, you have to know, you have to find out. So don't just base it on a hunch, base it on some good evidence, and go and ask those questions. It's that simple. Now let's have a little look at what other people have done and what lessons we can learn elsewhere. There's some really nice take-homes from other bits of research. Looking at parkrun, when we did a review of the Active Forest programme in 2017, we discovered that on Forest England sites, parkrun would get an average of 133 participants to an event. Now, of course, that fluctuated with the season and the weather. What staggered me was that they could double those numbers by running themed events. And that was a simple way, especially if it was kind of promoted as being, you know, a special event or a little bit fun and a great way, bring along some other people to this particular event. They could simply double their numbers straight away. Things that were important to people were getting the results uploaded so people could discuss their results. Remember that social aspect. If the more we can give them something to talk about, the more sociable it will be. Similarly, they got photos uploaded by the evening for the successful events. And there was a really good take home here, that the proximity of the parking and it being close to the start and finish of the event, and that all being close to a cafe or a pub or somewhere where people could socialise, the greater the proximity of those key factors, the greater the success of the event and the higher scores and satisfaction scores it got. So that's a very simple take-home message for us when we're organising events, that all those ancillary factors really matter to people.
And then just to jump in here, that particular aspect of parking, start, finish and cafe has also come across from the Orienteering participant satisfaction survey that we're doing, that people will comment about how close everything is together, and they really do appreciate that connectivity.
Excellent. So having taken all that on board, what are the variables? What are the opportunities? What are the things that we can change? And I would really like to encourage you to think about it in two terms. And I would like you to think about the hardware. So we can think about the venue choice and those facilities that we've just discussed. And obviously we can think about the course length and the physical sort of issues of the variables of the course. And it might be that you want to think about the terrain choice, and by adjusting those to attract those different motivational segments that we talked about before, you might discover that your events appeal to a different group of people and you get different levels of satisfaction, or maybe you get different people coming. If you think about the software, you can then sort of skin the event in the way that you'd like to. And maybe the thing for us to learn is the element of sort of team event or the social focus, and put more emphasis in that, because that seems to be what people are asking for or what people value. It might be that we want to think about the time of day or the time of week and make sure that fits in with people's lives, rather than simply doing what we've always done. Try things at different times and see if it gets a result. You might like to think about the kind of marketing you use, the kind of imagery that you use, and the sort of materials, where you place them, what sort of pictures, and what sort of words and language you describe an event with, because that can appeal to very different sort of motivational segments as discussed. Don't forget those all important themes. And if there's people that you can partner with, if you can team up with that youth group, if you can team up with that school, if you can go to where the people are that might have an interest in orienteering, then that's a very easy kind of low-hanging fruit way to get people in. Then don't forget that there's more than just staring down at the course and thinking about what's under your feet. Thinking about courses that provide the views, the opportunities for people to explore and discover, and the challenge, the sense of challenge you might want to lay on those challenge events. There have been some really nice examples of people experimenting in different ways, and they're not always for everyone. That's really important as well. There isn't a silver bullet here. There isn't a one size fits all. Gruffalo was a great example of orienteering that was effectively branded and packaged for a young or novice family market. They learnt a lot along the way when they did this. The initial maps were too technical for non-orienteering parents, and they had to really sort of dumb that down. And the subsequent customer focused product was a really massive success. It brought people to the forest sites in large numbers, and all sorts of people really enjoyed orienteering that had never given it a go before. Of course, that's not for everyone, and I hope I've sort of laid this out often enough. If you're going to experiment and do things differently, beware the trap of disenfranchising or demotivating the people that you've already got. You need to get that kind of buy-in, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Now, in terms of themed orienteering events, people have done some amazing things, and you really are limited by your imagination. And before we talk about the sort of other ways of doing it, let's think about the Explorer events. Round,
yeah, so if one of the successes with Explorer has been they're themed courses, and you've got animals, you've got mythical creatures, you've got inventions, fruit and vegetables, and there's an element of education, there's an element of fun, but the new themes are introduced every year, so it keeps the Explorer offer keeps it vibrant for, again, very young market, young participants and families, but that's one of the themes seem to be working really well.
Excellent. And then, of course, you can think about linking events to festivals. There's obvious ones that we've got the images there of Halloween events or Christmas events or Easter egg hunts, whatever it may be. But be really creative. We've seen some really brilliant ones in other sports that have been Bastille Day events or St. Patrick's Day or Diwali. So you can find a festival almost every day of the year if you look hard enough. So pick things that really appeal to your local market. Your local interest. We talked before about bringing heritage trails to life. Think about storytelling through events and things that will get people out somewhere where they haven't been before, or to see their local environment with a fresh set of eyes. Think about the views, think about the locations, think about where it's going to take people to, and really think about those social themes. So can we run team events? That's a really quick way of increasing the numbers. Can you have a team event in a relay format that turns sort of one participant into a number of participants if they have to bring a friend or bring family members along? And that's a great way to grow your numbers instantly. We've also seen people really getting that partnership thing right, and some key long-standing partnerships they could even be the sort of premise for a whole festival of orienteering. So think about who you might want to partner with, what you've got in common with different populations that have got the people that you're after. So there's an awful lot that we can do. There's an awful lot of variables. There's an awful lot of stuff that we can experiment with. What we've got to do is make sure that we wrap that up and we think about what turns a good event into a great event. As we talked about earlier in that research, people's first experience is really key if they're going to participate long term. So how can we get that right? We've got to deliver that whole experience. We've got to think about the before, the during, and the after. Once we've decided what are the variables that we're going to tweak, once we've kind of got that package right for a different target audience, think about that whole experience and try and see it, as we said before, turn that telescope round and try and see it through their eyes. Where does this journey start? It's way before somebody turns up on the day. They're going to have to find out about the event. It's going to have to pop up in front of them. They're going to have to think about it and consider it. And you know, so we need to think about what are all the interactions along the way between that and them turning up and taking part. It's a chain of events. So like any chain, we're only as good as our weakest link. Let's have a little think about that journey. The first step is probably marketing and promotion. How do participants find out about your event?
Yeah, so one of the things that comes to mind over here, so we had in the slide earlier that they, you know, our participants, our orienteering community doesn't respond as well to media as maybe in other sports. But we also know from the participant satisfaction surveys that we have a core of orienteers who, I think 95% of the people who responded said that they're either likely or very likely to recommend the event. So they are big advocates for what's going on at these club events. And if we can convert, if we can find a way to turn that likely or very likely into actual recommendations to friends, family, colleagues, then I think possibly looking at that side for marketing and promoting the events, and that's where people hear it from. If I hear it from a trusted friend, then they're more likely to go, oh, maybe it interests me, than on maybe social media or other channels. That's not to say we're going to throw those out the window, but actually looking at adding things on through maybe other participants.
And then we want to think about that pre-event information. And we keep going back to this word of expectation. What do they see and what do they expect? You know, it's very important that people get what they're expecting. So we need to make sure that we're setting that up in the right way, we're using the right imagery, we're using the right language, and we're building a correct expectation there.
Yeah, one of a few of the things that, you know, there's plenty of pre-information that goes onto club websites and so on, and some of the feedback we've had, so people are really appreciative of any information about facilities that are or aren't there. So we know it's not always possible to have sort of toilet facilities on site, catering facilities or refreshments, but I think people where they're fed back have said to us, you know, we know this wasn't available, but we appreciate that we were told beforehand. We were able to take our own drinks, take our own flasks, find a nearest, maybe signposting to nearest facilities if that's what we can do, but managing those expectations so when they do turn up, we give them what they're thinking of and maybe even beyond.
And then think about the booking process. How easy is it for somebody to book onto one of your events?
Yeah, again, online on the day, are there queues where they're trying to register? If they've been before, do they have to register the same details over and over again? If you've got a way of simplifying that, or and so on. So I know some clubs are doing stuff already where they're trying to track participants who are coming back, so they don't have long queues and they don't have to wait and re-enter details. So there's some great work happening there.
Now, we've done these reviews and workshops across a whole number of sports, and signage and directions is always a sticking point. You'd be amazed how often people will provide a postcode that takes folks to the wrong place, or how often people will try and drive down a closed forest track to get to the start of the event, because actually the event participant has never actually run through it themselves. So the take-home message here is put that information up, but then actually dry run it, test run it, you know, go and have a go, try and see it through the eyes of one of your participants and see if all the information that you're giving out actually works. And think about every step. So they've got to get to the right car park, but then can they actually find the point that everybody's going to meet? Can they find the start and finish? Is the whole thing going to run smoothly? Now, we talked before about the location and facilities. We talked about the fact that great events, the one thing they have in common is that all of those facilities are as close together as possible. I'm sure you all know the ones that work well for you, so the more you can capitalise on that, the better. Finally, it's well worth thinking about the results process and the debrief process. If people want that sort of social aspect of it, have a think about your events and think how functional that is, and think how much you can do to sort of facilitate or enable that social interaction and that social gathering. And as we said before, if people want to get together and chat, the more you can give them something to chat about and give them those results early, the better.
So,
example from LEI, who put a social venue on their pre-event information and all the stuff that goes on their website, so that anybody attending knows that there is this social aspect to it, and people will gather in the pub or cafe or wherever it is nearby that's been designated the social venue for the event. So that's kind of been built into their events as a matter of habit. And we also know from the feedback that we've got is that there is things like that stick out to people, and they leave an impression. So, for example, we had comments at Christmas about there being mince pies for sale, and just it fitting in with the theme and the atmosphere or the mood of that particular time of year. Or one particular event where it was on Remembrance Day, where there was a 2-minute silence and a word from the chair, which was really appreciated again by the volunteers and the participants, who where that stuck out enough for them to comment with about it and sort of send their thanks to the committee.
The more folks feel that people matter rather than just the simple technicalities of the course, the more motivated they're going to be in terms of that social aspect. And if we get it right, it's a really brilliant opportunity to give that people that wonderful kind of first experience that we know is key to them staying within the sport. Now, we've covered a lot of stuff there. There's a lot of things to go away and think about. There's a lot of information to gather. Think about what's working well, and think about what you might like to experiment and do differently. But if you're going to experiment, if you're going to make changes, do it with a bit of structure. I know this is a very simple sort of model, the Kolb cycle, but implement this plan, do, review sort of process. When it comes to planning, don't try and change everything all in one go, or you won't know what's worked and what hasn't. Make some really key, simple changes to events based on insight. Plan the whole thing, try it out and test run it and make sure it all runs smoothly. When it comes to delivering it, you've got to get the buy-in of the club. There's no point in 1 or 2 key people thinking that they're going to do things differently and everybody else just delivering stuff as it always has been. So to get everybody together, think about who needs to buy in, who needs to do what, get everybody on the same page, and then experiment, but do it in a way where you record the results. See who you got, see whether you're adding to your existing sort of participants, see if you've got different people, and if you record that properly, that will lead on to that review stage, and then you can think about not only did it work, did we get more people, but how did it work, and why did it work, and who did it work for? Those are the questions that you want to answer at the end. So if you think about that at the beginning, it makes it very easy to kind of put that process in place. Now, we've covered a lot in a short time, and we're obviously sort of happy to stay online here if folks have got any further questions.
I think we had one comment early on, and I've just connected it to which part it was talking about, but I quite like to bring it up. It's from Jane, who says about the basic needs trio that we talked about right at the start, that this is interesting for newcomers, that it may be quite difficult to meet the needs for somebody on their first experience, because the autonomy isn't necessarily, they're not necessarily have the skills to be autonomous, they don't necessarily have the community within the orienteering scenario already.
They're inevitably going to be curious if they've come along. So there's something about this already that they're interested in and sort of caught their attention. And it's a great opportunity then to be able to have that conversation with them. It was very easy for us to sit there and kind of go, look, this is why orienteering is amazing. Don't just take my word for it because I'm a fanatic about orienteering. This is why it's amazing. And you can spell it out in those terms. That actually, once you get into this, you will find that everybody will choose a length or colour of course that suits them, people will then have complete autonomy to go about it and make the decisions on and bring choices as they wish. And if you point that out to folks, you'll instantly see the penny drop. But of course, the danger is that all of us will take those kind of things for granted. So it's not like we have to deliver that to them as a newbie in one go. It's a great opportunity to spell it out in terms of what's coming and why Orienteering might have really brilliant support for them to get involved with. Good question.
Great. I don't think we have any more questions for anyone. So if there's anything else you'd like to raise, you've got an opportunity to do it now. Got some positive feedback though. Well done.
And we've quite unashamedly covered an awful lot of information. The great thing about the webinar is obviously it stays online, so you're able to then to revisit that. But we're very keen to support this with the information and the links and the handouts. You can go away and do further reading. And please, we really don't want people to feel like it stops here. Hopefully this is just the start of the process. So if there's anything else that we can do, then do just let us know. And don't shy in coming forward and asking me questions in the future.
Great. So if there's no further questions, then I would just like to say thanks for joining us, thanks for getting involved, and we hope you've both enjoyed and found this session useful. Please do send your feedback in to Peter. The email on the screen at the moment, and there is a next webinar that's taking place in July. That's 7 PM on the 23rd, and that's Understanding Purple Pen. So that's the next one coming up. If you missed any of the others, as I said, they're all online on our website and YouTube channel for you guys to enjoy again at a time convenient to you. So thanks, Martin, and thanks everybody.
Well done you for coping with the technology. Thanks for your patience.
And good night, everybody.